before the board adopts. There's the formal one that's required in May, but the board must adopt in April. Once the board adopts, the budget can't be changed. So we instituted this, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, and we're going to continue in that regard. So we had our first budget workshop on March 10th, and we moved to March 31st, and here we are April 7th. There are still a couple of stages to go. So we have the budget adoption, which will take place in 2 weeks. We'll continue the review process then. We'll do a 3-part truncated budget that night, so that the board can just see it one more time, and then move to adopt. And the reason for that is the reason for this hearing is that if there are things that come to the surface, there is always the possibility, and certainly it's well within the legal right of the board to change the budget that's presented tonight between now and adoption, which is why we will present it again, in truncated form, on the 21st, and note whether there were any changes, up, down, or whether there were no changes. So, and then after that, there is the formal hearing, and then, of course, on May 17th is the actual vote. So, one of the things that we like to talk about is why we do what we do. And certainly we want to make sure that we're preparing students to do whatever it is that they want to do in our system. And in Commack, that typically means go to college. That doesn't mean that there aren't some students who do other things, whether they go into the military or the workforce or trade schools. But predominantly, students go to college. And in the spring, in the fall next year, we usually present data regarding where those students were accepted. And so, given the fact that we were going to do this tonight, I asked for guidance to give me some information on sort of acceptances to date. So where have kids been getting accepted to college? And we're always looking for the students having the capacity to get accepted at the higher level colleges so that they can move in and move forward with their career prospects. And so I have just sort of a brief list of some of the colleges that they've been accepted to so far. And these are in alphabetical order. So I'm just going to read through some of them real quick for your information. Baylor, Binghamton, Boston College, Boston University, California Institute of Technology, University of California, Berkeley, Carnegie Mellon, Clark, Clemson, Colgate, Columbia, University of Connecticut, Cornell, Drexel, Duke, Elon, Emerson, University of Florida, Georgetown, George Washington, Georgia Institute of Technology, Hamilton College, Harvard, University of Illinois, Indiana University, Ithaca, Johns Hopkins, Lehigh, Maryland, Miami, Michigan, Mount St. Vincent, Muhlenberg, College of New Jersey, NYU Law School of Business, NYU Shanghai Program, University of North Carolina, Northeastern, University of Pennsylvania, the list goes on. Stony Brook, it's very, very impressive list of schools where the kids were accepted. Where they've committed to is sort of the next phase, and we'll try to make that determination. We know that students get accepted to different schools than they attend different schools for different reasons. And that's sort of this why do we do this. So I just thought I'd read through some of those schools tonight to give you a sense of where this particular class is, because every class is different. So, and I'm going to go through some of these slides quickly, because I don't really see anybody, or very few people in the room that have never been here before. So, if you've never been here before, okay, that's what I thought. So some of you are back there saying, oh, the faster he goes, the better. Because if we can get through this and get to the numbers, that'll be really helpful for us. So as you know, these are sort of our cornerstones, why we do what we do as we move forward. We're also making sure that there's access and opportunity for all students. So students that have special needs, we make sure that we meet their needs. Students that are at the high end have had IB for years. And then we started building programs for every kid in between. And access and opportunity has been a cornerstone for the last half a decade. And really it's been tremendous. We'll talk about that briefly tonight because we've talked about it so often. We want to make sure that we keep the tax levy as low as possible without hurting the program. And we want to make sure that we have long-term fiscal stability. And that has been something that has been tried and true for the last couple of years, as difficult as it's been, and we're going to continue with that process. So, the long and short of the program this year, or moving forward into next year, is that everything that's in place this year is in place next year. with some enhancements. So there's some things that we'll be doing differently. So there are some additional courses which we'll talk about. Class sizes are the same. Middle school enrichment program continues to grow and is a wild success. College level courses, those are growing in the high school. Instructional technology and cybersecurity in the special ed program. Now folks, keep in mind that although programs are added, that doesn't mean that some programs fall off. Not because of money, but because within the schools, teachers and staff are saying, hey, we'd rather do this program than that. We learned this, so we're going to do that. So we use these modules, but now we're going to use this book. So that is a natural and normal part of the process. And we do presentations in that regard. Those aren't budgetary decisions. So you'll hear that often. Well, there's a new course. Well, you don't have any more kids, so we're going to get kids to fill that new course. A course that was under enrolled just won't be offered moving forward. That's normal. So, students in elementary school, I'm not going to go through all of this news because all of you have seen these before. Low class sizes is going to focus. Instructional support in the classroom. The primary school needs added aids to help with what's happening in the classroom because of all the different variables associated with the reading program, the new math modules and the work that we've been doing there. And there's more to come on that moving forward on another presentation. Clubs and activities, they're all in place and in some ways enhanced. One of the things that we always talk about at the elementary level is class size. And the enrollment figures are something that come up. The 10-year enrollment projections, these were done 2012-13. They continue to hold true. And so what you can notice is that the enrollment declines as the years move forward. And what's really astonishing is that we're not surprised when the population stays stable, the kids in their first grade go to second grade and then they go to third grade. Those numbers won't surprise us. Once they're here, they typically don't leave. It's the number of kids coming into kindergarten. The number of kids coming into kindergarten has been stable, but it's been much lower than the number of students graduating. And so what we see here is in 15-16, they projected 366. We are at about 388. Next year, they projected 397. Right now, we're at about 388. I'm sure we'll pick up another 10 kids or more. But these numbers are holding true. So as you look down at the bottom line and where the population is going, if you look at 12-13, it was 7,200. And each year, it decreases. It decreases not because kids move out, but because fewer kindergartners come in. Mostly because people are having fewer children. Class sizes in the elementary school. This slide is a repeat from last week. You can see what the class size averages are, and then you can also see the ranges. So when we say the class size average in kindergarten for 16, 17 is 19, we want to be sure that people understand there could be classes with 21. So that's the range. It's 19 is more or less the average, but 17 to 21, so you can see some as low as 17, some as high as 21. We have something here called DNE, do not exceed. It is an informal commitment by the Board of Education and the administration to keep classes no higher than DNE 23 in kindergarten. There are contractual limits that we don't hold to right now. We hold to this DNE number. Question was raised at the last meeting regarding the number of sections and the ranges in individual schools. That was added to this presentation today so that you could see, in essence, what's happening in Indian Hollow next year with Northridge, Rolling Hills, Wood Park. And you'll notice that over years we see some ups and downs in the class sizes, the number of sections in those schools, but it's been holding pretty steady. The primary schools hit their biggest hit a few years ago with regard to population, but they've leveled off. The intermediate schools have taken some decline recently, and they are beginning to level off, and the decline is going to hit the middle school moving forward with regard to population. That doesn't mean that the program is affected. It means that the number of sections are reduced, but the number of kids in each section remains the same. Art, music, physical education, all the specials remain intact. The middle school has really made tremendous strides in the last several years. It's always been cornerstone to our program. I think particularly point of pride has to do with the wheel, the enrichment program, and the technology infusion that's been going on in that building. Kids are excited. They do a lot of tremendous work there. And you'll notice, as we've talked about this in previous meetings, that it maps from the elementary program in STEM to the middle school program in STEM, and then moves up into the high school, where that's been growing dramatically. But the same could be said of the humanities. We just use STEM as the examples here. Publicly next year we'll use the humanities and demonstrate how that works in the humanities, whether it's in English and social studies and things of that nature. But that mapping has been occurring as well. Student progress has been tremendous. It's no secret that there's a lot of consternation around public education now and state testing grades 3 through 8. Our focus here has and continues to be what's best for kids. And this kind of work is exactly what's best for kids. So this is an example of the enrichment program at the middle school, and I think to the right is where you can see how that has grown and shifted over the last several years, particularly if you're looking at the courses that are offered. And they are really exciting courses. By all accounts, students are excited, teachers are really engaged in the programming, and have brought forth their best thinking about what will serve students in these enrichment courses next year. On a new robotics course. And if you have never been to first robotics competition or some other robotics competition, I urge you, yeah, you will be beyond surprised. So the first year that I went to the marching band festival, I was flabbergasted at how spectacular it was. The first time I went to a first robotics, I fully expected it to be, a couple of small groups of kids and that they would be playing with robots, and not to say they weren't going to be running and doing great things. When I walked in, I thought I was literally at a college pep rally. There were teams and cheer sections, and the competition was deep and collaborative. However, make no mistake, they wanted their robot to win. They weren't trying to kill anybody, though. They were trying to see very useful topics were being addressed, like robots can find things, identify information, carry things back, things that we need done in society, not necessarily companionship. I know that I've seen that in the news lately, but how do they develop these from an engineering perspective? It was astonishing to me. So if you ever get a chance to go to a robotics competition, I urge you to go. So at the high school, we've done a lot of talk about this. Vermont has gained access and opportunity and growing that academic program. There's a lot of talk about students when they go to college and need remedial courses. I'm here to tell you, the vast majority of students from Commack High are already taking college-level courses in high school. So it is unlikely they need remedial courses when they get to college. That isn't to say there aren't some kids when they get to college who need some support and remediation. That's going to be true no matter where you go. It is by no means the majority of our students. And we've done some research on this, and you'll start to see those numbers go public. The colleges aren't really forthcoming about that information. So the state uses two-year state schools and two-year schools to sort of bolster the fact that students need remedial classes when they get there. And in Commack, that's not the majority of our students, but they go to private schools, but even the ones that go to state schools and two-year schools aren't going into the remedial courses at the same rate as others. And that's part and parcel because of the kind of coursework that they can take part in here. The research is clear that if you sit for at least one college-level course in high school, you have a greater chance of success when you get to college. And so what we're doing now, and we've talked about this for a couple of meetings, is we're helping prepare all students to take at least one college-level course. Bottom of this slide, you can see that 89% of all students who graduated last year took at least one college-level course. 71 took 3 or more. And 62 took 5 more. Those numbers are astonishing. So now we want to begin to track the level of success and indeed help students engage in even more than one. So you can see here tracks, if you will, that students who are interested in going to English 9 Enriched will then be positioned to take a college-level English course. Same thing in global. Same thing will be built in the other course opportunities as well. it really is sort of nothing short of amazing for students to have that opportunity in high school. It is clearly a college preparatory program. So how do we pay for all that? So as you know, predominantly it's through the tax levy. However, there are other funding streams, which is something we'll discuss tonight. But as you can see, the tax levy increase for next year is projected at 0.38. That is the cap. The budget increase is about 1.3%. And staying at 0.38 keeps us within the cap, qualifies us to for the property tax rebate, and also maintains the existing program with some enhancements. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Newman, who will go through some of the numbers for you, because the broader categories and the explanation. Mrs. Newman? That's all.
Thank you very much. Again, just to quickly start, some of the things that we look at over time, we do multi-year planning, and there are three basic main areas that impact our budget planning and budget development, and that is our revenue management, the cost drivers that drive the budget, and then also what is happening within the district's population. As Dr. James has spoken about the student enrollment right now, that is declining, which does affect our related staffing. To begin with, we'll look at the financing plan. Again, as Dr. James had alluded to earlier, the majority of our revenues are driven at the local level by the community and the property tax levy that is raised. It is a 0.38% tax cap for this year. The other areas of our financing plan are then next made up by state aid, which is approximately 21% of the total financing plan. That number has been going down. At one point in Commack, that number was almost as high as 30%. Then the application of fund balance and reserves is about 5.5%, and then there's about 2.5% of what we call other, everything else. Our financing plan, state aid, I'll start off by saying we were very happy to see that the full GEA deduct has been fully restored. That is the area that state aid is increasing by. Commack, our foundation aid formula, remains yet again frozen with a $0 increase. One of the pieces of information that we received recently, the Council of Superintendents put together some data for school districts to illustrate to us if the foundation aid formula was allowed to run and not be frozen as it presently is. In Commack's case, that would have represented a $2.9 million increase in our state aid next year. So unfortunately, that $2.9 million was left on the table and is not coming to Commack. GEA was restored, and we're just so happy that it wasn't deducted from us yet again. And I'm sorry to say I sound sarcastic when I say that, but over the past 5 years, Commack lost more than $21 million over 5 years. That line has now been removed from the state aid runs. However, I think the next conversation I'd love to have is when will the state give us back the $21 million that was taken? They did that over 5 years. I'm sure we would all be very happy to take that back over the next 5 years. In the area of other, we're seeing about a $660,000 increase. That is related to two general areas. Our district of location and district of residence revenues is projected to increase, and also life insurance proceeds are projected to increase next year. Our tax levy, again, that 0.38% increase generates $500,000. And our reserves and fund balance, we are keeping the same to pledge that amount towards the budget. That did not change from the 15-16 budget as well. The next slide I know is a very messy one, but I always do like to put it up because the district sometimes takes criticisms that we have too much money, we have too little money, we're not using money. This illustrates, and I take from the first column, is our audited financial statements, which are on our website so that anyone can look at them. The next column is those applications of fund balance and reserves that the district would pledge if they are needed. The next column shows what those balances would be if and when those dollars are utilized. And we go through 2018 at this point to show that the district has been utilizing reserves and fund balance. Now, the way that the district has fund balance and reserves, that represents previous surpluses. So when the district in a given year takes in more revenue than we expend, that results in a surplus, and those funds can be set aside for future use, or they can be applied into the next year. The district last year did run a deficit. A deficit occurs when the revenues that come in are less than the expenses that went out. So that illustrates why we are seeing decreasing fund balance and reserves. New York State restricts school districts from having more than 4% of your budget as unassigned fund balance. And unassigned fund balance is basically a general savings account that can be used for whatever the Board of Education deems appropriate. There are no restrictions other than that you cannot have more than 4%. A few years ago, we always maintained a 4%. We have been utilizing that, and right now that's down to about 2.5%. Moving on into, since as Dr. James by the show of hands, there is no one in this audience that has not seen the budget presentations, so we thought we're going to really shake it up this time and show it in what's known as a 3-part format, which is required by New York State. All school districts need to publish their budgets in that format, and that's an intent so that districts or residents can compare multiple districts because it's given in the same format. Broken down into the 3 parts, which is administration, capital, and program. Administration contains all those costs that are related to general support, including coordinators, directors, central office administrators, building administrators. You know, most people would assume that building level administrator costs would be built into the program, but that's not how New York State requires us to do it. So presently our administrative costs represent 10% of the total budget, capital 14%. Capital are all those costs related to the facilities and operations of the school district, the infrastructure, if you will, and also all debt service that's been previously approved towards capital projects. And then program, which represents 76% of the total budget, are all those costs that are related to instruction and classroom, teachers, teacher assistants, aides, textbooks, all classroom supplies. I will go through this very quickly since all of you have seen all of these and we've talked about any increases or decreases, what they are related to. This first page here, as you can see, there's not a single change that is above $10,000. Our auditing fees is down $17,000. I will just point out to that because not all auditing fees recur annually. So for instance, in this past budget, 15-16, or current budget versus our proposed budget, there is not an audit of our workers' comp reserve next year. Also there's inventory audits that are conducted. Inventory audits are presently being done through BOCES code, which generates aid. Our legal costs, we're projecting a slight decrease, and legal costs are very difficult to predict because in many cases those fees are outside of the school district or the board's control. So for instance, unfortunately, if we have students that make poor choices, could result in student discipline. The state, there is due process that must be done. Legal fees are incurred. So depending on what may be going on from year to year, those costs will fluctuate. Also, the district conducts residency hearings. We go through great lengths to protect the district assets in that we want to make sure that students that are attending our schools are entitled to that free public education in our schools. So from time to time, if information comes to us that a family perhaps is no longer residing in Commack, we aggressively pursue investigations to make sure that that is the case. And if a family is found to no longer be living in Commack, we will take steps to be sure that they, in essence, unenroll in Commack and enroll in the district in which they are actually residing. Central printing and mailing decreased by about $21,000, and that's really an effort to continually reduce those printing and mailing costs and using our district technology whenever possible to keep costs down. Again, all of the increases here are basically related to contractual increases. We did go through that line by line at the last two budget workshops. Our research planning and evaluation code that is going up by $29,000. There had been nothing coded to that code in 15-16. Those costs are based upon, we are utilizing BOCES yet again next year to update on enrollment projections. Dr. James had put up a rather long slide of where those projections are coming. We haven't had that done now in about 3 or 4 years, so we have that in the budget next year for that to be done. And then also SAT administration is coming out of that code that also is done through BOCES and will generate BOCES 80. Our in-service is decreasing, and that is somewhat related to, there was a lot of work being done with the Common Core and modules, so we are seeing a slight reduction. Employee benefits is reduced, and you'll see this in all three categories, basically related to the reduction in the rates to the ERS and TRS pension systems. Overall, our total administration, which again represents 10% of the budget, is increasing by $43,000 and change. Our proposed capital budget is a reduction overall of $228,000. I would point to 9901 and 9950, where we're seeing a $900,000 reduction. That is related to the principal and interest payments of bonds that the district has. We do have a reduction in those principal and interest payments as some of the debt is being fully retired. The increase to capital fund of $686,000, what we have proposed to the board is to take of that $900,000 of retiring debt to use approximately $700,000 of it to fund ongoing capital projects within the district. As we look to build up those annual costs, the hope would be that we would not have to go out to the public for a large bond issue, become sustainable on an annual basis. We started that 2 years ago, and each year the board has agreed to increase that, and those capital projects are being done each year rather than saving it all up and then having to do a large bond issue. Our proposed program budget, again, the increases related to this area for the most part are contractually related. We are seeing a decrease to staff, which is related to enrollment decreases. We do see an increase in special education. Those are related to a larger population and the needs of those students as well. Teaching special schools, I do like to point out, because that is not necessarily, although that's what New York State calls it, does not necessarily mean it explains it. What that code is are those programs that are self-sustaining. They do not incur any tax costs to the residents. So for instance, our continuing education program is included here. Our driver's education program is also included here. Anyone who participates in those programs do pay the full cost to run those programs. Our computer-assisted instruction, so the CMO at our last budget workshop did a comprehensive presentation of all the exciting things that are going on in technology. The bulk of that increase is related to an increase in technical support for all of those devices that have been added over the past few years. Our psychological services, that increase is due to, there was an added support put into the budget this year. However, it was done after the budget had been passed. Those services are being maintained into next year as well. The other increases are contractual on this item. One thing I would add is that in our athletics and co-curricular, there are some increases to intramurals at the intermediate, middle school, and high school levels. Transportation, those increases are related to contractual costs. And again, the employee benefits portion of the program cost is decreasing, again, mainly due to those decreases in pension costs. Overall, our total instruction is going up $2.6 million. That is the largest increase in the entire budget, as it is all being driven into instruction. And I will conclude again by our three-part budget. And with that, I would turn that over to Dr. James and the board.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. So at this point, the presentation is complete. What we'll do is entertain questions first from the board and then from the audience on the budget. So this isn't a regular board meeting. This is an informal budget hearing. So the questions that will be posed will be related to the presentation and the proposed budget. So first, any questions from the board?
Actually, I have a question, but I don't think you can answer it, but I just thought it was done. And that is, I know we are very careful in every way that we look forward and make our important decisions about a budget line. And we've had enrollment projections over time that I've seen, and for the most part, they've been absolutely, oddly, it's almost unbelievable that their formulas are pretty true to form. But that one year where we had 19, how many students special ed that came in?
Last year it was roughly 20.
20. How could that, are we going to know that that's part of that enrollment projection? I mean, because we do wonderfully for our students of special needs. How does that possibly be able to be formed?
That is a significant challenge. And this is, Ryan and I actually spoke about it at length this morning. She was here today. She just very well, so we sat and chatted about if we get another unexpected influx to that degree. So typically we allow for 3 to 6 students that have high needs moving in. There's no way for us to expect that. There's no way to, in my career I've never had 20 kids move in. That have those kind of requirements. So there is no way for us to do that. That we would then have to pay for it out of unapplied fund balance.
No, it seems that, just to piggyback off what Mrs. Mazziello was saying, I mean, the budget is going up $2.4 million. The program increase was about 2.6, and the special ed is about 2.3. So that's the number one cost driver this year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and again, this is an area where the state does mandate services, and we do generate some aid as well back to offset some of those costs. So I do want to point that out, that the state does do high needs special aid as well.
And was there an initial projection of the tax cap increase, say, going back to last year, what we thought it was going to be this year? And I know 0.38 is much lower than we thought, isn't that right?
Yeah, the biggest driver for the tax cap formula is the tax growth rate, which is determined by New York State, and that is only put out in January. So although looking over in time, so for instance projecting what the tax rate cap might be next year is difficult because we just don't have the data a year in advance to be able to project that. I think, New York State did a great job of selling the 2% tax cap. This year is the first real classic year to demonstrate it is not a 2% tax cap.
Initially, we thought it would be somewhere between 0.75 and 1. That's what we projected, or what was projected, statewide that spring, and that number just kept going down. And it settled. Statewide, it's actually 0.12. Ours is a little higher because we have some small exemptions, but 0.12. There are some districts whose caps are negative numbers. So the pierce the cap to get to 0, they have to pierce the cap. So the state thinks it's potentially an anomaly, so they didn't address it this year's budget talks. If it comes in this low again, will they address it? They might. I just think that it's not sustainable to maintain it at, in essence, 0. The 0.38 is, for us, is darn near 0.
It's almost nothing. I can't say what a fantastic job the administration did, considering the challenge of having 19 special ed kids move into the district at a cost of $2 million, then having the tax cap come in so unanticipatedly low, despite the fact that this is even said it's advertising a 2% tax cap, it's 0.38, it's $500,000 essentially flat. To be able to put together this budget, keeping programs intact, keeping class sizes low, in some cases expanding programs, intramurals, I just think it's fantastic, and I think everyone should be commended.
Actually, certainly the cast of thousands and had a hand in that. Just about every person here was involved in that, and when they get sort of their, for lack of a better term, marching orders, it's we can't go up. We can't go up. And they come back and they really are creative and invested, and not to be lost in that as teaching staff can say, okay, we're going to move forward and try to make things better for kids as well, even though there's no additional money. So I want to give credit to everybody here who was part of that.
Again, echoing a similar sentiment, not only thanking the whole, the board for their effort, for, working with Albany, but also administrators, PTA, people, public in general, getting the GA restoration back. It was really critical. It's almost $1 million back to help maintain the programs. Without that, I think this budget would be completely different, and we're looking at different things, unfortunately, not restoration. So again, thank you to everyone who did the hard work, went to Albany, Mr. Fonte was there, and everyone who kind of really pitched together to get us to where we want today to get this program intact. One of the things I was thinking about too is that the 2.52% of our unassigned fund balance is based on last year. I'm assuming, since we're not even replenishing that, we're actually going to go down even further.
The percentage will continue to go down.
Further. So if we actually stay neutral, our fiscal, if we don't run a deficit, our fiscal stress report may come down slightly, but we're still probably in that stress zone, I would assume.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. So that's a concern that we still don't have a method or methodology to replenish that unassigned fund balance as of yet. So that's something we need to kind of keep an eye on looking going forward, because as Mr. Bihar said, if we do have people coming to the district again, we don't have it in the budget, it's going to come out of that unassigned fund balance again. So just something for people to take a look at for. Anyone else have any other comments or comments?
At this point, we open it to the public. Anybody who would like to make a comment on the proposed budget for the board's consideration. Again, it's very clear to about the budget, a budget presentation. It's not necessarily a Q&A. It is an opportunity for public comment. Thank you. Microphone is to my left.
One of the things I just wanted to point out, as you're doing your math and graduating everybody, was that there's 200 less kids enrolling next year. And based on the average cost, that equates to a $5.7 million savings. So we're actually net positive by a lot of money. One of my questions was the capacity of the elementary schools. Does anybody know what the capacity of the schools are at each school?
The maximum number of students per school?
Yes.
No, we don't know. I don't off the top of my head. But certainly somebody can know that too.
So you don't know kids you could fit in one school? Like if you
No,
wanted,
I don't.
if you wanted to close one school down and.
I don't know that.
Really? That's never been an analysis done?
Well,
Yes,
we
I
had a
don't
lot
know it
of
off the top of
information
my
going
head.
on. I mean, when we revamp schools, we always have that information handy when we're rethinking the schools, but we don't walk around with it in our head.
Because I was looking at like, the school behind the middle school, Indian Hollow, if you know this, Rolling Hills. And there's only like 230 kids in that school. Is that 50% capacity? Is that 100% capacity?
If I had that in my head, I would be able to answer that question.
I will tell you though, Mr. Fusco, I will not recommend to the board that we close the school. So
I just
capacity,
asked if it was a capacity, so is there?
you were intimating, so I'm gonna tell you what I think. I think no, I think it's not a good idea, if the school goes dark, I think it can't be effective, I think for a lot of things. So I'll be on the record as that, is that capacity? By virtue of the fact that our do not exceed numbers are below the maximum professional capacity, the building is below capacity. So could we put more students in the building? Yes.
Well, that's confusing, that statement, because my question is there 50 classrooms and you're only using 10 of them? And then you can still have 10 classrooms that are being utilized that have less than the maximum that you're on the sheet for. So I don't know why what you said is even relevant.
I'm sure there's not a single room in the building that's
Again,
not
we're not
being
gonna
utilized.
debate, thank you.
Just that's a good question, and you said you don't have the answer for it. I'm surprised you don't, but if you don't,
That's
you don't.
insulting, Mr. Fusco, to think that I would know.
I'm sorry.
The number of classrooms being used in every building at any given moment.
Well, why wouldn't you? During the budget season,
Thank you,
why,
Mr. Fussell.
why wouldn't you know that? It doesn't seem. One of the other statements that's been made at several of these meetings was that we've been running at operational deficits. That's been happening for like the last maybe 4 years or so. Only 2 years.
2 years we ran a deficit, correct?
Have we been looking to raise revenues, increase revenues? Have we been looking to cut expenses to not run operational deficits?
Yes.
I guess we wouldn't have numbers though, right?
Put them up all night.
Excuse me?
Put them up all night.
I mean, usually you don't plan on running a deficit, you run a deficit because something comes in the way of the budget, and last year what came in the way of the budget was, as Mr. Beaver mentioned, additional special education students came into the district, we had to provide them services, that services cost X amount of dollars, we had to use the money from the unauthorized fund balance.
So you don't know the areas, the actual areas where you ran your deficits to make the operational deficit
We've announced those repeatedly.
in your budget numbers?
Yes.
But the budget numbers are really not even accurate, so like, how could you ascertain anything from them? You got the $9 million in fluff that you didn't spend last year, and it looks like you got the same $9 million in fluff in the budget lines again this year.
I guess the terminology again, the appropriated fund balance is the money that's moved over again from year to year. Again, it's money that's appropriated from 1 year to the next year. You may be calling it as a terminology fluff, but the actual accounting term which the control's office uses, we're actually using it as an appropriated fund balance to fund next year's budget, which again is part of the controller's plan.
Would you look to possibly start your budget at the actual expenditures rather than the budgeted amount last year that you didn't need and you didn't spend?
It's all in the order in the appropriated fund balances, so it's, everything is there, and last year we were in operational deficit, so again, there was no surplus because we were in deficit, so
I
it's.
mentioned the word surplus. I asked you if you guys looked to start this year's budget at what your actual expenditures were and work forward from there rather than work off last year's budget, which was $9 million more than you needed, and then you added $2 more million to it this year. $2.5 more million to it.
I will tell you that's not what we did. Thank you.
That's not what you did? Yeah, obviously.
We started zero.
How could you start at zero?
Thank you, Mr. Fusco. You can't debate every question.
I'm just asking for
Every
a
time
different
you just
answer.
say, basically say we're lying.
I'm basically saying, I'm just asking you to
I know the
explain.
videotape's on and I know what you're saying.
Excuse me?
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys know what the estimated cost per student is this year, for the next year's budget?
That number doesn't come out, right?
That figure has not been released by New York State. New York State does that calculation. I believe you're aware of that. I think we talk about it every year. We give it to you every year. New York State has not released it yet.
I don't think we got it for last year.
New York State has not yet released it.
How about the year before?
The most recent year was put out last year. I believe if we go back to the videotapes, you were given the number.
Well, do you know what it is?
It's not in your head
No.
Off
either.
the top of my head, Mr. Fusco, I don't recall the number that New York State released over a year ago.
Is that available on any public website?
Last year's would be, and it would be part of the public documents.
What website would that be on?
New York State Education Department.
There's also a website called Google that you could go on.
Really?
And type these questions.
That's how you got on the board, because you're so smart. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Fusco. Anyone else have any public commentary on the formal budgetary presentation? All right, with that, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Pretty much the principal next year. Huh? You're not doing that?